All right, well, welcome everybody to our support strategy call. Looks like we've got a good group, so thanks everybody for joining us. This is Shelley Wishard. I'm the regional director, and I'm going to be leading the call today, and it's my privilege to be able to share this information with you all for such an exciting season. But I want to get started with a couple of housekeeping reminders. If you will, if everybody will go ahead and mute either your computer or your phone. I do have a section, or a good bit of this call actually, that I want to be interactive. So I do want you to be able to mute and unmute. But for now, while I'm talking, if you don't mind just keeping it on mute, just so we can eliminate any background noise. And then once we get to a section where there's some interaction, I'll remind you, and just remember to unmute yourself, or else you'll just be talking to yourself. So we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to open up with a scripture that I think is especially meaningful to us as we're going into this support season. And it's Hebrews 10, and I'm going to read verses 19 through 25. And I think it's neat because the Hebrew writer opens up kind of saying, here's the situation, like here's the fact of the matter. And then he goes into saying, because of this, here's what we need to do. So here's the scripture. It says, therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is, his body, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near. So that's the why, because we have Jesus. Now here's the what. So we've got, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And here's the verse I really want us to pay attention to. It says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So I just think this verse is especially significant for us as we're going into the support, season where we're supporting our project leaders. I think that scripture of letting us consider how we spur one another on toward love and good deeds, and also encouraging each other, meeting together, I think those are encouragements for us to really pay attention to what we're doing and to see, wow, this is an opportunity for us to spur each other on to good deeds and to love and to meet together and to encourage each other as we do see the day approaching. And so I hope you take encouragement from that as well. And I'm really excited to talk about this season because I just feel like support is super exciting, because you finally start to see the ball or that boulder rolling down the hill, right? Because let's face it, affirmation and engagement, they take a lot of intentionality and tenacity. Am I right? Like, I just feel like those can be kind of hard. I feel like we're trying to convince people why they want to talk to us and trying to help them understand why they need us. But with support, typically, people are pursuing us. We've kind of finally turned that page on the calendar where people are excited about OCC and they're wanting to talk about it and they're hunting us down. And so, man, we've got a lot of amazing opportunities in front of us. The harvest is ripe. And so, to me, this call is one of our most important because it's when we need to be at the top of our game and ready to harvest all these opportunities that are coming our way. So let me just say a prayer over our time and we'll dive in. Well, Holy Lord, we just bless your name. We love you, Lord, for your sacrifice of Jesus and what that means for us. And that means, Lord, that we have the opportunity to serve you in this way, that we have the opportunity to share your ministry and your gospel with people here and all around the world. And so we're just thankful for that, Lord. Bless our time. Enabled me to be clear and organized, Lord, and prepare the listeners' minds to be alert and ready to receive, Lord. We just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So I want to start out saying this call is primarily geared towards leadership, towards coordinators. But we also invited some developing team members, and I think some of our area coordinators may have invited team members that don't have ministry coordinators. So I think we have a good mix today. I'm looking at the participation list. We've got some coordinators and some team members. So there's something for everybody in this call, but I did want you to know it's primarily geared toward leadership, and so it's kind of about strategy. But if you're a team member who's working under, kind of on your own, not under a coordinator, this can be very helpful for you too, as you're going to want to develop your own strategy and kind of come up with your own plan for how you're going to navigate the support system. So we've got a couple of objectives on our call today. The first one is going to be that we want to help you develop an effective support strategy for you and your team. We also want to give you some ideas for how to set effective support goals for you and your team. We want to be able to review resources that are available to support project leaders. And then finally, we want to provide some ideas for your quarterly equipping meetings. So for you coordinators, we want to set you up for success in getting your teams ready. And I also want to say we invited church, community, and student coordinators on this call, but my default is just kind of to talk about churches. So I just want you to know, if you're a student or community leader, whenever I say churches, just insert groups. It really works the same for both. My language just tends to kind of run that way. All right, so real quickly, I wanted to just do a brief overview of the OCC year. And y'all are all familiar with this, just reminding us that we affirmed the first part of the year, we engaged in the middle, and now we're ready for support. And I kind of see this as just a reminder to us, we are on the home stretch. And if you if you set really good goals and really got your team set up for success for affirmation and engagement, support will be a breeze. Because what happened in affirmation was you touched base with all of our participating churches or groups, and you got them to set goals and kind of put together a plan for the year. So ideally, that's what happened in affirmation. And then with engagement, ideally, you reached out to new churches and you got them interested, and maybe even some committed to PAC, and then maybe you still have some that are on the fence, but they're kind of poised and ready for the next step. And so what that means for us for support is that we're just kind of harvesting those opportunities and continuing to roll them forward. So we're in a really good position. And if you don't feel like you're in that position this year, then just take note and think about, okay, how can I set myself up for next year to where I'll be in a little bit better shape going into the support season. All right, stand by. There we go. All right, so let's talk about the why. I always like to start calls with why. Why are we supporting? What's the purpose of this? And so I always like to look up the definition, the Webster's definition of the word that we're talking about. And so I looked up the definition of support, and the Webster's definition is to bear all or part of the weight or to give assistance. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing during support. We're bearing the weight and the support for our project leaders, and then we're going to be giving them assistance. So I have a question for you all. So if you want to answer this, remember to unmute yourself. But what are some of the needs that we are supporting for our project leaders? What are some of the needs that they're going to be having going into the support season?
Ordering materials.
Excellent. Yes, ordering materials. Absolutely.
To educate packers with anything that's new or they haven't updated in the past few years?
Absolutely. New information, new resources, new information, new updates. Yes, just keeping them educated on everything that's happening. Absolutely. Encouragement. Absolutely. That's a great one. They definitely need encouragement. And I'll just kind of use this to spring into my first point, that project leaders need support. So that's the reason why we're doing it, because project leaders need it. And we all know that project leaders are the wheel that keeps this cart moving, right? I mean, without them, our ministry really doesn't happen. And so if they need support, well, then we want to give it. And project leaders, I think, have a little bit of a difficult time, or they can. Some of the things that our project leaders might be facing are, they may be doing this alone at their church. They may not have pastoral support. They may not have a team to help them. They may be facing, competition, so to speak, from other ministries. And they may not really be resourced. Maybe they're not familiar with the website and don't know all the things that are available. And so they're just trying to go it on their own. And so they really do, like y'all said, they need encouragement. They need to know about our resources. They need to know new information. So these are all things that we can really, really help them with. And then the second thing I want to share about why we want to support is that we have resources and ideas to support them. So as team members, you have what they need. You know all about the resources that we have, and you have the advantage as team members to really oversee a lot of different churches and groups. And so you're able to have the benefit of seeing how multiple people do it. And so you're able to share ideas that maybe some other people haven't thought of. And so that's a real advantage for you as a team member, is that you're able to share those resources and ideas. So you're in a great position for that. And then finally, we have the resources. I'm sorry, solid support is going to result in shoebox numbers. We're going to see an increase. If we support our donors, then they're going to increase boxes and they're going to stick with us. If we don't support, they're likely to get discouraged and go do something else, or they're just going to kind of stay stagnant, and we're not going to see that real increase that we want to see. So that's kind of the why behind support. And let me just remind everybody, I hear a little bit of background noise. If you can remember to mute your phone or your computer, that'll help us out there. All right, so now what? We talked about the why. Now, what is support? So I kind of like to think of support as a three-legged stool. So the first leg is going to be connect. The second leg is inspecting. And the third leg is resourcing. And just a note here, as we're talking about support, I just want to say a reminder that ideally a church or community or student group team member is going to be supporting about 15 to 30 churches or groups. And that can vary a bit. You may have somebody really high capacity that can maybe do 50, or you might have somebody really struggling with time that's only doing 10. But 15 to 30 is a real sweet spot. We feel like that's a great number of people that each team member can fully support well. And so that's just good to keep in mind as we move forward. That's about 15 or 30 people per team member. So these are our three legs of support. So we're going to talk about each of these briefly. So connecting. Somebody kind of mentioned this with the encouragement piece. But the question that we're asking when we're wanting to connect with our project leaders is, how do we motivate and inspire our project leaders? How do we do that? So I'd love to ask, if y'all want to unmute again, if anybody wants to share, what's one thing that you found is a really great way to motivate and inspire your project leaders?
Keeping them in contact.
Yes, keeping them in contact with you, with a team member.
Correct.
Project leader workshops.
Project leader workshops, awesome. Because project leader workshops are... Oh, what was that? I'm sorry.
Praying with them and for them.
Prayer. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Yes. Well, excellent. Well, I'll put a few up here. Y'all have covered all the ones I had, but the ones I was going to cover was, first of all, one way that we connect with them and motivate and inspire them is that we acknowledge their value. Like I said earlier, man, they are the wheel on our cart, you know, so really letting them know how valued they are and how important they are to the success of our ministry. And so really casting vision for them about the big picture, making sure they understand how they fit into what's going on around the world. The second thing is prayer. Somebody mentioned that. Prayer is one of the best ways that we can connect and motivate and inspire our leaders. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback again, so if you'll mute yourself again, that'd be great. And just an example, like, you know, let's say you're hosting a project leader workshop, and maybe somebody that's on your team or in leadership over you calls you and says, hey, I hear that you're having a project leader workshop. How can I pray? And what would you like for me to pray for? I mean, how encouraging is that? You know, it's great to hear from people that are in this with us, that are praying for us. And so your project leaders, I think, would love to hear from you, for you to call and say, hey, I know you have a goal of 50 boxes this year. Let's pray over that together. That would be really amazing. And then somebody else mentioned the third one, which is translate the cause. This is kind of an encouragement piece. Connect them back with the ministry. Share a spiritual impact story with them. Make sure that they're aware of what's going on in the world with OCC. And finally, somebody else mentioned this. They said connecting with them, foster community. This is one piece, like from my viewpoint, from what I see, I think this may be our weakest area, an area that we could really grow in. I think that we're good sometimes about connecting one-on-one, but really as a team member, the church or community or student team, their responsibility is to foster community amongst the project leaders. Because we all know when we get together with other people in the same role that we're in, man, ideas start going off like firecrackers and you get excited and your energy is contagious and all of that. And so really be thoughtful about how can you foster community and connect your project leaders with each other. And great ways to do that, just a few, are the project leader workshops, which somebody mentioned. The Facebook group is a great way. Doing maybe a community newsletter for your project leaders. So just whatever you can do to get them connected is going to be very valuable. All right, so we're connecting with project leaders, and the next thing we want to be doing is inspecting our project leaders. And the question that we're asking here is, what are our project leaders' needs? And so some good questions to ask here are just asking them, what are your challenges? Are you on track to meet your goal? Is there anything holding you back? Do you have any concerns? And then I want to point you back to, we have the really great coaching guide for the ministry-specific training on support, which is on MyOCC. For those of you who are leaders, we have that coaching guide that leads us through discussions with our team members once they finish the MST. And that coaching guide, in it has some really great questions that you can ask a project leader that just kind of give you an idea of, okay, what direction do I need to go? How do I best support this project leader? And then once you know that, then you're going to move right into resourcing them. And the question we're asking there is, what tools do we have that will complement their plans? Once you know what their needs are and what they're trying to accomplish, then you can say, oh my goodness, you need this discipleship card, or you need the presentation kit, or you need a go box, or whatever it may be. You can make those suggestions that will really help them see that increase and meet the goals that they're wanting to meet. And then one quick note to coordinators, one responsibility for us, if we're going to be resourcing and supporting our project leaders, is that we've really got to know the website well. We've got to be very familiar with the resources, and I think you all are. But coordinators, as you're looking to lead and equip your teams, that's one thing that you can really drill down on this season is everybody on my team really familiar with the resources and know how to use them and how they're useful for a project leader. All right, so here's a bonus question. Does anybody know where this picture came from? Is this picture familiar to anyone? No one's seen it before? Wow, I'm surprised. Well, this has nothing to do with supporting, but I went to Boston recently and I saw the place that Cheers was modeled after, that 80s show. But anyway, I used to watch the show and I loved this picture, and it's in the opening credits of the show Cheers that was on in the 80s. But I love this picture because you look at these people and they're like super excited, right? They're super excited to be winning. And so I want to talk now. We've talked about the why we support. We've talked about what is support. And now we're going to look at, okay, how do we win at support? And I have a question for y'all. Think about the last time that you played a game that you weren't familiar with and you were kind of learning how to play. What's the most pressing question that you have when you're learning to play a game?
What are the rules?
What are the rules? And more specifically, how do I win? What's the objective? That's what I always want to know. How do I win? And I'll share just briefly, my nephews were trying to teach me poker the other night, and they're 14, 16, and 12. So there's not a lot of, a whole lot of knowledge going on there. But so they were explaining the rules, and they gave us a brief overview, and my sister and I were playing together, and we got so frustrated because we didn't really know what cards trumped. It seemed to change every time. We didn't know what the winning cards were. And so you know how poker is. You get cards and then you have to place a bet. And I kept asking, how do I place a bet when I don't even know what cards are good? Like, how do you win at this game? And it was super frustrating. And so I want to be sure that everybody on this call knows, how do you win at support? What does that look like? And I love what my coworker Tricia says. She has that phrase, y'all probably heard her say it, they are in it to win it. And I just think about that all the time, and I think if you're on this call, You're one of our team members that's in it to win it. And so you're going to be out there this season with a lot of activity. And so we want to make sure the activity that you're engaged in is actually the activity that's going to move ministry forward. So that's hopefully what I'm going to be able to share with you today. So let's look at some of our specific goals and what we're really trying to accomplish in our region through the support season. So this is just a reminder. Some of you are probably very familiar with this, but our regional goal for this year in terms of shoe boxes is 1,060,000 shoe boxes. So based on our numbers from last year, we are trying to get an increase of 81,099 boxes. So this is going to be significant because I'm going to share some numbers with you during this section that I hope you'll find interesting. Now, I'm a numbers geek, and so I find this very interesting. Whether you do or not remains to be seen, but we'll try it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some more very specific goals that we kind of set out for this year. And I'd like for you, if you've got a piece of paper handy, I'd like for you to get a scratch piece of paper that you can just jot down some things on. Because when we're looking at wins, I think it's really good for us to know where we are so far in the year. Let's do a quick assessment on how have we done at achieving our goals and setting ourselves up for success up to this point. And this is perfect because many of you have probably just recently done kind of your mid-year check-in and kind of seeing, okay, how are we progressing towards the goals we set out in the ministry plan? And so now is a good time to look at this. So get your pencils and paper ready because here's your first question, and you can just jot this down on your paper. So how many of you how many of the project leaders that you supported set a goal for this year? And then how many of those agreed to an increase? So that's just kind of a good question to ask yourself and kind of check in and see where you are. And the reason we ask that question is because one of our big goals this year is to see an increase in shoe boxes, as shown above, by 8%. And so if we want to increase 8%, then that means the churches that we're working with or groups, they need to increase 8%. So this kind of lets you know, are we on track? Are the churches I'm supporting, are they increasing by 8%? And also, did those project leaders set goals and increase? And then here's the math that I think is kind of interesting. So we have about 7,200 churches in our region that are supported by that are participating. 1,200 of those are supported by team members, and that's a rough estimate, but about 1,200 supported project leaders. If every one of those churches that we're supporting packs just an additional 25 boxes this year, that will mean an increase of 30 boxes for us. So 30,000 boxes. I hope that's encouraging to you. The next question would be, how many of you already have project leaders that are committed to hosting a countdown event or some type of informational meeting at their church? That's going to move the ministry forward if we have project leaders hosting their own meetings. So that's a good question to ask yourself. Adding 60 church team members. This is a huge goal for us this year, but we've realized that we only have 80 church team members in our region supporting 7,200 churches. And anybody that's even halfway good at math can know that's not good. We really want to see an increase in our team members. So, a good question to ask yourself if your coordinator is, okay, how many church team members have I brought on this season or this year? And if you haven't brought on any, then it's a good time to say, okay, well then how am I going to bring more on? In our region, we have 16 church coordinators. And so if we're going to be meeting this goal, that's going to be approximately 3 team members each. So we're kind of counting on each of our church coordinators to bring on those 3 team members. So just kind of a good way to assess yourself and see, okay, am I getting there, or do I need to focus a lot more on recruitment this season? And then we want to see an increase of participating churches. So we want to see our 7,200 churches go to 8,000 churches. So we want to grow that number by 8%. So a good question to ask yourself is, how many churches have we engaged that we know are going to be participating with us as new churches or groups this year? And so our goal in our region is 580 new churches. That would get us to that 8%. And so for each of you church team members on here, that's going to be 7 new churches for each of you. So it's just kind of good to think of it in those terms. Okay, as a team member, I'm going to try to get 7 new churches. And then if each of you is able to secure 7 new churches, and each of those just pack 100 boxes, which is kind of our average box number per church, then that would equal 58,000 boxes. So that's awesome. We're going to be past our goal at that point. And then the final goal is that we would like to have 1 special access packing party per area team. And so that typically, if we're able to take an 800 church that's packing 800 boxes and encourage them to pack 1,000, which is the minimum for special access, then, going backwards, then that would mean 8,600 more boxes. If every one of our area teams was able to encourage an 800 packing box church to pack 1,000 and do special access, that'd be 8,600 boxes. So just kind of, to me, is encouraging to see, wow, if we can do these things, our goal will be met, no problem. So that's just an overall of where we are with goal setting. So let's look at how that really translates into our support season. So what are our big wins for support that then support those goals that we just went over? So obviously an increase in shoe boxes is what we want to see come out of support season. We want to see a retention of all of our donors and an increase from the participating churches. We want to see an increase in the number of project leader hosted events. Because we all know if we've only got 80 church team members, and they can probably only host 80 events in the fall. But if we have 80 team members that are encouraging 5 project leaders each to host events, then we'll have 400 events in the fall. So it's easy to see that our capacity is greatly increased by hosting project leader hosted events at their own church. And that allows the project leader to cast vision and get the education down to all the church members of the church or members of the group that we'll never see, right? We also want to see an increase in prayer network partners. This is an awesome opportunity for you to reach out to them. We want to see an increase in area team members, so we want to make sure recruitment's happening during the season. And then finally, we want to identify and approach prospects for special access. We all know, or for those of you who've reached out to special access for parties, if we start at the first of the year, it's a little too late. We really need to start laying the groundwork now and see, okay, who's already having packing parties? Who's on track to be packing 1,000 or more? And go ahead and lay the groundwork to say, hey, would you be interested in doing this next year? So that's a great win for support. All right. So now we've talked about the why, the what, and the wins, and now let's get into the how. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So I want to start by talking about, I think this is a good visual, this little Greek temple thing, because it shows what our foundation is and then the pillars that support our project leaders. So we've already kind of mentioned our foundation for project leaders is prayer and connection. And so those things we want to just kind of permeate everything that we do. So with prayer, I think it's great, kind of like we talked about before, ask your project leaders for prayer requests. Pray with them in person or over the phone or send texts. Give them prayer support for everything they're doing at their church. And then be diligent to pray with them often and let them know that you're praying. And then the second thing we're looking at is connection. And ways to do that, we kind of mentioned before, check in with them regularly. Not to be a pest, so you want to, not all the time, but check in regularly. Consider that monthly newsletter with ideas and maybe a project leader bio. Share what are other project leaders doing in the area so that they can stay connected with each other. You might possibly want to start your own project leader Facebook group to where you can invite your project leaders to join you and you can do some things to encourage them and share buying tips or, education, share spiritual impact videos with them in a little bit more personalized way. And then definitely involve your project leaders in other ways to serve the ministry, such as serving at a drop-off location during National Collection Week or serving at the processing center. So prayer and connection are very foundational, and so your teams need to be thinking about how are we doing this? How are we connecting and how are we praying for our project leaders? And then the support that we provide is in terms of resources. So these pillars here, or columns, these are our pillars of support. So the yellow column, and you're going to have to turn your head sideways to see these, but the yellow column is kind of our online resources. So we've got the Project Leader landing page, which is amazing. And I'm not going to take time to go through it here because I think most of you are probably familiar with it. But again, coordinators, make sure that all your team members have visited this page and checked it out because there's so many great resources there. So we've got the Project Leader landing page. We've got the Facebook group, the Project Leader Facebook group. We've got the website in general. So the online resources are there for you to use to really support and meet the needs of your project leaders. And then we've got the red column, which is our opportunities to serve. This is a great way to support and care for our project leaders because we know if a project leader comes and serves during National Collection Week at a drop-off location, or if they're able to get to the processing center, they are going to have a deeper investment in the ministry. They're going to feel more affirmed with what's happening because they're going to understand the impact of what's going on, and they're going to be more excited about the ministry. And then if you can get a project leader to bring a couple of people from their church to serve with them at either location, even better. So that's a great resource we want to make sure that we're using is those opportunities to serve. And then the green column is our toolbox. That's kind of what we call it here in our office, the toolbox. That's going to be your speaker tours, which I know many of our area teams are hosting one-day speaker tours this year. Man, get your project leaders to that speaker tour. That will blow their mind. Special access packing parties, which we've already talked about. That's a great tool, a way to encourage a church or a group, to pack and be able to send to hard-to-reach countries. And then our Go boxes. What an awesome tool. Those are going to be shipping in the next week or two, and you'll have those in your hand. And so really thinking strategically, how can I use these to support my project leaders and their goals? Use them to get new churches involved. Use them to help project leaders increase. Use them to encourage individuals to have their own packing parties. So really be thoughtful about how you'll be using those Go boxes. And then the final column is the blue column, and that's our printed resources. So that's going to be the promo kit and the retail store, which is coming soon, hopefully. But we also have on our website lots of great resources, the trifold, the prayer photos, all the printed resources that we have available are amazing. And so be sure that you're familiar and your teams are familiar with those, that you can use those for growth. And then one thing that's not on this little Greek temple is what we have from our headquarters that supports you. And so I wanted to make sure I told you about these two exciting resources that come directly from headquarters. So the first one is that they do a mail out to everybody in our database, all the project leaders or donors in our database. They're going to be mailing a promo kit. And that's the little kit that comes wrapped in cellophane with the DVD in it and all that. And so those are going to be mailed around the 1st of August. And so your project leaders hopefully will be getting those. But that's always a great thing to check in with your project leaders about, because maybe the promo kit went to the church and the secretary threw it in the trash and it didn't get to the project leader. So just making sure they get that resource, but we do actually mail that out. And then the second resource is what we call a material order list. And this is something that's compiled and sent to coordinators on a weekly basis. And that will start about mid-August as well. But it's a list of anybody in your area that's ordered materials through our website. And so it just kind of gives you a really hot list of people that are immediately interested in the ministry. They've gone online and ordered something. So no, they're looking, they're interested, and they're kind of a great person to contact because they're obviously in the game. So those are two additional resources available to you that you can really use to your advantage as well. I want to remind y'all, this is just a little slide that shows the downloadable resources that are available. This is on the Project Leader landing page on the website. And I was talking earlier about these Project Leader-led events where a project leader hosts their own event. These right here, if you're not familiar with these, I just highly encourage you to spend time looking at them. These are full-blown events that are pretty much completely done. It has an agenda, it has a script, it has decorating ideas. I mean, it has every invitations, really anything anybody would want for an event, it's packaged right here. And so it makes it very easy for our project leaders to feel confident in hosting this event at their church. And so we really have great resources for them. And the intention of these is for these to be able to be used by project leaders and put out there for their church. All right, so I wanted to share just a quick example, and this may be overkill, but I just thought it might be good to talk this through. And I want y'all to engage with me in this here in a minute. So Crestview Church is going to be our example, and they packed 25 boxes last year. And they did that because they promoted through video, and they had a promo table for 1 week that was set up by the church secretary. And this year, the church secretary is really wanting to pack 100 boxes. So I'd love to hear from y'all. What are some things that our team members could be doing to help them reach their goal? What are some things they could do to help this church secretary go from 25 to 100?
Share with them the greatest journey and everything God's doing in the ministry.
Amen, sister. The greatest journey is awesome. Yes. Educate them on the impact of the ministry and what we're doing. Absolutely.
Ask if there are any additional resources that they need.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what do y'all think, kind of going along with that, what do y'all think would be a great resource for them? Are there any resources that you would think, man, I'm going to make sure they have this?
The greatest journey tabletop display.
Yes, you mean that journey of a shoebox trifold?
Yes.
Yes, that's an awesome resource.
It doesn't say that they have a project leader.
Amen, Robin. There's no project leader. Like if you're a team member, to reach out and set them up as a project leader, that would be huge. Because this church secretary, she's answering phones and she's typing letters, and she's got a lot going on. But if she can find a lay person at the church who would be interested in heading this up, that would make a huge difference. Yes.
One of the best resources I found is, of course, a personal speaking engagement to the entire congregation. And sometimes they may give you 5 to 10 minutes. Well, you can't get a lot in, but if anyone still has a copy of the Layla Allison video, if you show that, last year I saw a church increase 400%.
Wow, Wanda, that is awesome. And that's a great point. Like, getting in there and being able to make a presentation to the whole church can really transform. So those are great ideas. And I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to, it was the Layla Allison video.
Yes.
Thanks, Kathy.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes. And that's on, I believe there's a copy. In my follow-up email, I'll see if I can find the link to it, and I'll send it out.
Okay, great.
But yeah, finding those great videos and being able to make a presentation is an awesome way to increase. So let me just kind of put a few of these up here. I think y'all hit most of the ones that I had. But, we could give them go boxes, right? If they're wanting to go from 25 to 100, let's give them 75 go boxes. Does that equal 100? 75? Yeah. Give them 75 go boxes. Like Wanda said, ask to make a presentation. Like Robin said, establish a project leader. Man, y'all are hitting all these. Ask the project leader or the church secretary, or if they're a drop-off church, the drop-off team leader, to host an event. Invite this church to serve at a drop-off location during National Collection Week. So maybe talk to the church secretary and say, hey, are there a couple people that we could plug in over here? And then they'll get more excited about the ministry, and that's probably a good way to find a project leader, right? Or invite them to go with you to the processing center. Invite the church to... Hello?
I understand we're only receiving 100 boxes this year, and we are opening OCC up to not just the churches, but the entire community. We have a pastor behind us that's involved in everything. So we've already given out 50 of the 100 we're going to get.
Well, Wanda, we can definitely talk about that offline. So absolutely,
Okay.
that's a valid concern. Yes. So yeah, so you can invite a church to a local speaker tour. Like again, we're having many of those going on in our region, and you can go to the events page on the website and see what's happening around you. And then maybe you could share the idea of packing a box a month. You know, encourage families in the church to pack one box a month between now and November, and that could really exponentially grow shoe boxes. And connect them with other project leaders through a newsletter or conference call. You know, let the church secretary, or if you are able to establish a project leader, get connected and get some ideas. Now, I'm going to ask one more time. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. If y'all will mute again, that would be helpful for the feedback. All right, so those are just some good ideas, and hopefully that example kind of helps see these are ways that we can really well support our churches and groups. So now we're going to turn our attention to really focusing primarily on coordinators. But again, if you're a team member without a coordinator, this can be helpful for you too. But we really want to focus on how are we going to set our team up for success. So we know what we're trying to accomplish. We know what our resources are. And so if we're leading a team, how do we get them to be really impactful and effective at supporting? How do we need to equip them and engage them? So the first thing we're going to need is a very solid plan. And the plan is very simple. It's got four steps to it. We're going to evaluate, we're going to set goals, we're going to equip, and we're going to coach. And as a coordinator, these are four things that you're doing every single quarter and really consistently year-round. So the first thing you're going to want to do is evaluate. And we've kind of built in, and we've been encouraging for every single coordinator to have a quarterly evaluation and equipping meeting with your ministry team. And if anybody can come up with a fun, catchy name for this evaluating and equipping meeting, please email me because it's a mouthful. But that really is what it is. It's evaluating the season before. So as we're going into support, you're going to be evaluating how did things go with engagement? Where are we at this point, and what are we wanting to do in support? So you're evaluating, and then you're going to be equipping your team. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Whoops. Sorry about that. So evaluation equipping meeting. So here is your challenge, your mission, if you choose to accept it today. I would like for every coordinator on this call, if you have not set up your support, equipping, and evaluation meeting, go ahead and write down on your paper right now a date when you'll do that. Do not leave this call without scheduling your evaluation and equipping meeting. Your team needs that. Your team needs for you to resource them and equip them and get them ready, help them set goals for the support season. And then once you've set your meeting, be sure to let your area coordinator or your regional point of contact know so that we can support you in those meetings, because that's one of the things that we really believe in. There's a lot of power in that, and our teams are going to be much more effective if everybody's having these meetings. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about these meetings here in a second. All right, and then the next thing you're going to want to do is goal setting, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then coaching. And this is really where we're going to focus on the monthly coaching calls. And we have encouraged every single coordinator to make sure that you've got a very specific meeting time with an agenda. It can be a call or a meeting where you're connecting with each of your team members. We all need that on a monthly basis. We all need to be encouraged and connected with and held accountable on a monthly basis. So that's going to be your key piece for support, is coaching your team members. So we'll go into depth into all of these just a little bit. So evaluation, let's start there. How do we evaluate? So this sheet, some of you may be familiar with. This is actually just a simple spreadsheet that we've given out. It's part of our, what we call our debrief tools, and it's primarily used at the beginning of the year, but it actually is great to bring this thing out every single quarterly meeting. And each team member should be keeping up with this on their own. And it's just a very simple way for them to keep track of what they've done and kind of evaluate what's been working and what hasn't. So you'll notice, if you can see this slide here, at the bottom of the slide, you've got prospective churches or groups. And so as we're evaluating engagement, that's what we're going to be looking at. So it's a place for you as a team member to list out all of the churches and groups that you've contacted, and then you can make notes. Did the church commit to participating? Did they attend a project leader workshop or countdown event? Did I give them go boxes? And then at the end of the year, you can record how many shoe boxes did they pack. Did they end up participating? So it's a great way to do that. So at your meeting that's coming up, everybody should come with this sheet, and y'all can evaluate, okay, how many churches committed, and is their commitment the result of attending a project leader workshop, or the result of getting a presentation, or the result of, reaching out by email or phone? So it kind of helps you see, wow, everybody that we reached out to by email ended up giving us a presentation. That's great. Maybe you have a really effective email. Or maybe the only people that committed were people that came to a project leader workshop. And so you can see, wow, we really need to get prospective people to a project leader workshop. Or, it's just a good tool for you to see what works and what doesn't. So that's really the evaluation piece. And so each of you should evaluate engagement at your quarterly meeting. Then the other thing that happens at this quarterly meeting is setting the goals that you want to make for support. So there's kind of a couple of different goals here. The first one is going to be your overall team goals, and hopefully those were set at the beginning of the year in your ministry plan. And so you're just kind of checking back in with your overall ministry goals. You're seeing where you are because you're evaluating, and you're saying, okay, here's what we need to accomplish from August through November. Here's what, as a team, we need to accomplish. And then from there, once you know that, then you can start looking at each individual team member and say, okay, if we're trying to get, 15 project leaders to host an event at their own church this year, and I've got 3 team members, then okay, each team member needs to find 5 project leaders that are willing to host a project leader event, or whatever it is that your goal may be. But it lets you break it down very specifically so that every team member leaves this meeting knowing exactly what their goal is and what they're going to be trying to achieve. And then every team member should have a plan for each supported church. How am I going to reach out? How am I going to resource them? How am I going to encourage and support them to increase this year? So a couple of things you might want to consider setting specific goals for would be, like I mentioned, the number of project leaders hosting their own events. Maybe the number of churches that are being supported to increase. So how many of the participating churches are you really encouraging to increase this year? How many new churches are participating? Maybe you want to set a goal for X number of people that we want to see serving at a drop-off location or the PC this year. Maybe your goal is we want to see this number of P&Ps, prayer network partners, come out of support season. Or maybe we want to see, like we mentioned before, 3 area team members come out of this. And maybe we want to see a special access packing party. So when you're working with your team at your equipping meeting to set goals, these are just some good ideas for what some good, solid support goals could look like. And then, of course, you can fill in the numbers based on your team and where you are. So we've evaluated, we set goals, and then we're going to equip. So this slide may be familiar to some of you. We call it the equipping quadrant, and it basically kind of says you need to go around all these bases in order to fully equip someone. So we first need to tell them what they need to do. Then we need to show them what they need to do. Then we watch them do it and make sure they caught it. And then we provide feedback. So you're going to want to, with your teams as a coordinator, you're going to want to cover all the bases. So the first step in equipping is going to be for everybody to complete the ministry-specific training. If y'all remember, this was actually the first MST that we rolled out last year. It came out last August. So many of the team members may have already gone through this, but I would suggest having them go through again just as a refresher, since it's been 8 months since we've seen it. So my suggestion, set a deadline and have all your team members go through this before your meeting, and that way they come prepared. And if somebody wants to unmute and answer this, which part of the equipping quadrant do you think the ministry-specific training covers? which part of that quadrant does the MST Online, what does that cover on this quadrant?
Tell and a little bit of show, maybe.
Excellent. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I would say solidly it does the telling. And maybe, like she said, I think they do maybe a couple of examples that show, but it really doesn't get heavily into showing, it doesn't get heavily into watching, and it definitely doesn't provide feedback. So part of the work is done. If they watch MST, they've been told what to do. But then your role as a coordinator is to figure out for your equipping meeting, okay, how am I going to show them what to do? How am I going to maybe watch them and see if they're really getting it? And then how can I provide feedback to them? And part of this is going to be done at your equipping meeting. And then the providing feedback piece is going to come out in your monthly coaching meetings. So you can actually continue to equip them throughout the season. All right, so this next slide, I hope this is helpful. I hope it's not too much, but I wanted to kind of dive deep here with equipping, because I can see as a coordinator you may, have a sense of, angst about this equipping meeting and, what do I do and what do I share and what are we supposed to be doing? And so I'm hoping that this will help you. So this tool that is shown on this slide, it's called a RAC. And it means the RAC stands for resources, attitudes, competencies, and knowledge. And so when we're going to go to equip our team, the first question we want to ask is, what competencies and attitudes are needed to be effective during this season? So as a team member, what are they going to need to know how to do, and what are they going to need to believe in order for them to be effective? So you can see here on this little quadrant, you've got competencies in the lower left, and you've got attitudes in the upper right. This list is not exhaustive. I just threw a few things on here that are competencies that are needed for support and attitudes that are needed for support. And so when you are getting ready for your equipping meeting, put these on here. And every team may be different. Some teams may be already fully competent at one thing, but maybe not as competent at the other. So it's good for you to know your team and where they're at. So if your team is low on a certain competency, we'll put it on here. And then that's something you're going to want to work on. So once you know what competencies and attitudes you want to infuse into your team, then you're going to be looking at these resources and knowledge. So the upper left quadrant and the lower right quadrant. And there you're going to list what resources do we have, and then what are things that they're going to need to know. So if I want them to be, to encourage somebody to host, a project leader to host an info meeting, well, they're going to need to know themselves, how do you host an info meeting? Make sure all your team knows how to host that. With a resource, if you're wanting them to reach out and have their project leaders host their own meeting, then the team member definitely needs to know about the project leader resources that are on the landing page, those event packets. So that's kind of the concept of this, is that you're looking at what's needed and then how do you fill that in at this meeting. So for instance, just an example, if you are, let's just take that goal, if you're trying to encourage your team to encourage project leaders to host their own event, a good practical exercise that you could do at your equipping meeting would be, have everybody look at those agendas on the project leader page, which I showed you a couple of slides ago. Make sure they get familiar with it, and then maybe you ask them to share, okay, how would you cast vision to a project leader to encourage them to host this on their own and to make them feel competent to do it? How would you cast vision? Let them share with each other how they're going to cast vision for that. And then maybe you go ahead in terms of setting goals and you say, okay, now that we kind of know how to do this, let's write down who are the project leaders we're going to approach and when. Go ahead and have them calendar it. I'm going to call them next week and see if they'd be willing to do this. And so that's just a good idea of a practical exercise you could do. Now, one other really great resource we have for you is on those coaching guides from the support session on the online training. If you're a leader, you have access to a coaching guide, which is something that you can use to ask questions and, kind of talk to your team member after they finish MST. If you'll pull that up, it actually has some suggested exercises on there. And they're a little bit more general, but they're helpful. But then, so you can use that if that's where your team is. But if your team has some very specific needs, then this RAC that I'm showing on this slide could be a really helpful tool for you. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of this rack. I use it for everything. And I just find it really helpful to help me think through, what's needed. What do I need to cover? And then I just put together, this is just a very simple, sample equipping meeting agenda. Just an idea of what types of things are you going to want to cover. So we've got spiritual encouragement is always valuable. That's something the ministry coordinator would share. The ministry coordinator would share the reminder of what the engagement goals had been. And then she or he could lead the discussion about the evaluation. How did we do with engagement? Then the ministry coordinator can refresh on what are our ministry area goals. What are we trying to accomplish this year and where are we? And then you can go into the support season and say, okay, so given that, what are our goals for support? What are our ideas on how we're going to support? What are some challenges we might face? And then you can do some practical exercises so that people can see things modeled, ask questions, kind of dig into it, rather than just being told, here's what we're going to do. So hopefully that's helpful to you. So we covered evaluation, we covered goal setting, we covered equipping, and now the really key piece is coaching, because you kind of equip everybody in a group, but the coaching happens one-on-one. And we all know that when somebody's asking us good questions and asking how our project leader workshop went, or how are you doing at making your goals, we're more engaged. And so as a ministry coordinator, you want to make sure you've got that monthly coaching call with each of your team members, and that you're holding them accountable to what they set out to do, and that you're inspecting. So you're asking good questions and seeing, okay, how are they doing? What challenges are they facing? What are they doing really well? And then that gives you the opportunity, once you know that, then you know how to equip them or how to encourage them. And it lets you affirm what they're doing, or maybe it gives you the opportunity to say, you know what, I think maybe a better way to do that might be this. I think you might have more success if you try this approach. So it lets you do some correcting, and then it just fosters your relationship with your team member, which is largely what this is all about. All right, so now we're at the end of our call, so quick review, and y'all can tell me how I did, if I accomplished my goals or if I didn't. So our first goal was to develop an effective support strategy for you and your team. And so what I presented there was I presented the plan of evaluating, setting goals, equipping, and coaching. So you've got your strategy built in right there. Then number 2, we wanted to set effective support goals for you and your team. So we talked pretty extensively about what our regional goals are, and then kind of broke that down into, okay, what does that mean for you as a church team or a community team? What are your specific goals? And then number 3, we reviewed resources for our project leaders. And so we had that little pillar, the Greek temple, that showed you the different types of resources and encouraged you to go on and make sure you're familiar with all of those. And then finally, number 4, we provided ideas for your quarterly equipping meeting. So we shared, how you prepare, maybe what kind of exercises you want to do. We encouraged you to go ahead and schedule those meetings. And then we talked through a sample agenda. So now I'd love to just open it up for questions. We've got just a couple of minutes, but I would love to answer any questions that you may have. So unmute yourself and fire away.
Shelley, I think this was an excellent call. You are the best of the best at projecting the cause, the need, the ministry, and what we can do to empower more people to pack shoeboxes and reach more children.
Well, thank you, Wanda. I hope that it was very valuable, and thank you for saying that. But I can't have covered everything clearly. Surely somebody's got a question. Well, I'll close out then, but I do want you to know if you do have a question and maybe you just hadn't thought of it yet or hadn't formulated in your mind, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer. I'll send out a follow-up email, and I'll try to get my hands on the link to that Layla Allison video that Wanda mentioned, because it is a really sweet, just a sweet, impactful video, so that y'all have access to that. But just know that our office is supporting you, and we'll be praying for you and your efforts. Did somebody say something? Okay. All right. Well, thanks you so much, everybody, for your time, and have a great week.
Thank you, Shelley. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Great job.
Thank you.